wasn't just one of us. Monica was the best of us.
I'll help you remember. Deal.
He shows up at the house, I think that'll say even more.
I will stop at nothing.
Well, don't leave us in suspense. Let's hear it.
Why the hell are you trespassing?
This was not the send-off Monica deserved. Gio's juvenile defiance toward his family has officially passed its expiration date. The petulance might have worked for a while, but now it only underscores his immaturity, especially when contrasted with the tender affection he shows Lulu. If growth is ever on the horizon, it needs to happen soon. The question of who should inherit the house remains an open wound. Handing it to Tracy would be almost poetic justice. After all, she spent years bristling against it more than anyone else. Monica's half-sister may provide fresh insight into the family tree, but let's be clear, she's still a stranger. Blind trust is not the Quartermain way, nor should it be. Meanwhile, Drew continues to demonstrate how not to handle loss. His farewell lacked any trace of sensitivity, showcasing instead his chronic inability to put his child first. A father who drags his daughter through grief on his own terms will soon discover resentment where love should have been. Scout has already endured more than enough, yet Drew insists on compounding her pain. If he truly learned anything from the woman he called mother, he would understand that children's needs always outrank parental self-indulgence. On a brighter note, Steve Burton and Jane Elliott are turning grief into art. Their performances have been nothing short of riveting, raw, layered, and worthy of Emmy consideration. That this story cuts so close to home, given their ties to Leslie Charlson, makes their delivery all the more impressive. Unfortunately, the send-off itself fell victim to interruptions. Lucy barged into the hospital dedication, Drew rolled in on cue to derail Monica's memorial, and together they managed to undercut what should have been a graceful farewell. For a character of Monica's stature, the chaos was unworthy, leaving the goodbye feeling incomplete. Spinelli's been loyal, patient, and devoted, which is exactly why he's doomed. What happens to Spinelli now that Nathan has returned from the dead? Again? This is the eternal soap opera question. When one presumed dead lover strolls back into town, who gets pushed out of the family portrait? Spinelli and Maxie weren't just together. They had built a household with their daughter Georgie, Maxie's other children, Bailey Lou and James, and a reasonably functional family dynamic. But now that Nathan, her husband at the time of his death, is suddenly alive, does Spinelli quietly pack his bags? Or does he fight for the life he's built? Let's be blunt. Maxie was once head over heels for Nathan in a way she never quite was with Spinelli. Spinelli has always adored her, perhaps more than she adored him. Their love story has often felt like one-sided worship, punctuated by long stretches of the writers ignoring them entirely. In contrast, Maxie and Nathan's romance was framed as grand, tragic, and star-crossed. With Nathan's resurrection, the balance tilts inevitably back in his favor. Of course, this assumes the man is truly Nathan. In Port Charles, DNA tests, scars, and even fingerprints are worth about as much as a fortune cookie. Is this the real Nathan? A clone? A brainwash sleeper agent? Or simply Peter August with yet another facelift? The possibilities are endless, and all equally ridiculous. Soap logic requires a twist. Otherwise, what's the point of hauling an actor back after 7 years of freedom? Spinelli, unfortunately, is already positioned as expendable. He's a recurring character, and the show has treated him like Maxie's backup plan for years. If history repeats, he'll be the one asked to step aside with dignity, while Nathan and Maxie bask in the glow of their epic reunion. The writers have pulled this trick before. Sam dropped Patrick the second Jason reappeared, and Sabrina's wedding dreams evaporated the minute Robin returned. Why would Maxie's story be spared the same recycled melodrama? And yet, there's something uniquely tragic about Spinelli's situation. He's been raising James as his own, loving Maxie unconditionally, and quietly keeping the family together while the show conveniently ignored them. If Maxie wakes up from her coma only to leap back into Nathan's arms, Spinelli becomes the dutiful loser in a love triangle designed to glorify Naxie while treating Spixie as filler. But here's the real rub. The show hasn't cared about Maxie and Spinelli for years. Their relationship, such as it is, has mostly existed off-screen. If Maxie ends up with Nathan, expect to see every kiss, every tearful reunion, every soft focus montage. If she stays with Spinelli, expect silence. Perhaps a line of dialogue about how things are going great at home. The imbalance says everything about where the writer's priorities lie. There is, however, potential for a genuine triangle. Maxie did love both men, differently but sincerely. Spinelli's jealousy, Nathan's confusion, and Maxie's divided loyalties could fuel real drama. Unfortunately, the safer bet is that the show reduces Spinelli to a narrative speed bump before shipping him off to be tech support in some other city. And let's not overlook the added layer of irony. Spinelli and Nathan actually liked each other. Spinelli admired Nathan as James's father and spoke warmly of him, which makes this triangle even crueler. Imagine losing not only your partner, but also a man you once respected. The writers could mine that complexity for gold, but odds are they'll go for recycled melodrama instead. So, will Maxie choose the devoted oddball who has always been her safety net? Or the resurrected Adonis she once promised forever? In true soap fashion, she'll likely pick Nathan, unless, of course, he turns out to be a brainwashed imposter. Either way, Spinelli should keep a suitcase packed. After all, in Port Charles, the loyal ones are always the first to be sacrificed. Here's the harsh truth. General Hospital doesn't always honor its legends the way they deserve, and Leslie Weber might be next on the chopping block. When Laura recently mentioned her mother Leslie being unable to attend Monica's funeral, it was more than a passing line of dialogue. It felt like the writers opening the door to another farewell, this time for Leslie Weber, the character embodied by Denise Alexander for decades. It was a subtle yet ominous reminder that sooner or later, the show will have to confront her absence in a more permanent way. Leslie has not been a fixture on screen for years. The last meaningful appearance came 4 years ago, when she helped Laura deal with Cyrus at the hospital. Given that distance, one might assume her departure would be handled quietly. Yet her history is far too important to allow for a simple vanishing act. This is a character tied deeply into the show's legacy, and she deserves a proper tribute, especially in a year when General Hospital has been pummeled by loss after loss. The problem, of course, is narrative logistics. With much of Leslie's immediate family scattered or off-screen, the show's bench of mourners is alarmingly thin. There's Laura, Lulu, in a coma, Charlotte, and Rocco. Nicholas, who should already have been released from prison, would logically return for such an event, as would Lucky and Aiden. Spencer, who once lived with Leslie as a child, would be another meaningful presence, though his reappearance seems unlikely given the writer's track record. One can only hope the show avoids the shameful mishandling that befell Amy Vining, whose death was glossed over for years until a fleeting mention at the nurse's ball. If Leslie is written off, a remembrance episode feels more likely than a grand funeral. Perhaps something akin to Ruby's tribute, where friends and colleagues stopped by to pay respects, or a formal dedication at General Hospital itself. That would at least acknowledge her decades of service, both as a doctor and as a matriarchal figure. Ideally, Jonathan Jackson would return as Lucky to anchor the tribute. Flashbacks lose their power without a familiar emotional anchor beside Laura. Yet any send-off will land under the shadow of 2025's staggering real-life losses. Denise Alexander's death in March followed a cascade of heartbreak. Jacqueline Zeman, Leslie Charlson, Billy Miller, Sonia Eddy, and now Tristan Rogers, among others. Fans who have watched since the 70s and 80s are being asked to grieve one icon after another, both on-screen and off. It's exhausting, and it underscores how vital it is for the show to handle these moments with care. A lazy montage or a half-hearted in memoriam would be an insult. At its best, General Hospital understands how to honor its legends. Bobby Spencer's tribute proved as much. At its worst, it buries them in silence. The difference lies in whether the show treats these characters as disposable plot devices or as the pillars on which the entire legacy rests. Leslie Weber deserves more than a footnote. She deserves a proper goodbye, one that not only honors Denise Alexander's immense contribution, but also offers fans a sense of closure. Anything less would be a betrayal. not just of a character, but of the history of General Hospital itself. Faison as a family man? Please! He didn't raise children, he raised international crises. Some families collect heirlooms. The Westbournes and the Cassidines collect neuroses, felonies, and a flair for the theatrical. It's almost poetic, then, that members of the Westbourne Reeves clan keep finding themselves entangled with Cassidines, Liesl with Victor, Britt with Nicholas, Nina with Valentine. Truly a cross-family merger of melodrama. Both bloodlines carry enough crazy to power a decades-long soap, and yet it never feels forced. It feels inevitable. Liesl, of course, was never one to settle for ordinary. She had a taste for men whose hobbies included world domination and psychological warfare. Victor Cassidine and César Faison were not merely eccentric, they were full-throttle maniacs. That's precisely why they suited her. Liesl's brand of affection required a man who could build a weather machine or brainwash a continent before dinner. Speaking of villains, Madeline Reeves always gave off strong Helena Cassidine energy. The poise, the venomous family betrayals, the cold grandeur. She was a cut-rate Helena in designer shoes. The tragedy is that Madeline was written without the complexity that made Helena compelling. Helena, before being reduced to a caricature in later years, was layered enough to command both fear and reluctant admiration. Madeline, by contrast, remained a stylish placeholder for true villainy. Helena would have destroyed her before breakfast, and done so with a smile. This brings us to the baffling retcon of Faison as some kind of doting father. One can accept that he kidnapped for sport, stalked Anna across continents, and dabbled in mind control. But tucking children into bed between his DVX assignments? Absurd. Faison was an international supercriminal, not a Chuck E. Cheese regular. The attempt to domesticate him stripped away what made him terrifying: his singular obsession with Anna and his sheer unpredictability. Not all romantic pairings deserve revival, but Nina and Valentine did. Their relationship was a gothic romance, dark, twisted, and deliciously over the top. Soap operas used to excel at those. Love stories laced with betrayal, wealth, and just enough dysfunction to remind viewers why therapy exists. Valentine's return could restore that rare flavor of grandeur that modern storylines often lack. As for Britt and Nicholas, they were the perfect mirror. Two products of chaos who somehow made sense together. But like so many promising pairings, they were sacrificed on the altar of writerly whim. Their shared dysfunction could have been a strength. Instead, it was squandered. Of course, nostalgia still elevates some characters. Madeline may have been underwritten, but with Donna Mills in the role, she didn't need depth. Mills carried a pedigree of delicious villainy from Knots Landing, and she delivered menace with elegance. She deserved a longer run, and if soaps can resurrect anyone, why not the mother from hell? After all, her death was delivered by phone call, the soap equivalent of a shrug. Bodies don't always stay buried in Port Charles, and neither should Madeline Reeves. In the end, Helena remains the gold standard. Ruthless, complex, and oddly sympathetic. She could wage war on beloved characters and still inspire grudging admiration. That is the essence of a true soap villain. Compared to her, Madeline was a footnote, Liesl an acolyte, and Faison a cautionary tale of what happens when writers forget that supervillains don't change diapers. General Hospital didn't just forget Michael and Lulu's bond. They buried it in favor of lazy storytelling. The bond between Michael and Lulu once carried real weight. Enough that their recent proximity raised eyebrows from viewers who remember when their relationship actually mattered. Once upon a time, these two were genuinely close. Lulu wasn't just another cousin. She babysat Michael and Morgan, advocated for him when he woke from his coma, and even housed him with Dante after his release from prison. When Dante went missing with the WSB, Michael was right there helping her raise Rocco. This wasn't some throwaway family tie. It was a substantial part of both their stories. But then the great energy shift happened. Lulu's memory wipe Ice Princess storyline, the Dante drama that saw him manipulate Michael into confessing to Claudia's murder, and Lulu's eventual coma sent the relationship into narrative limbo. What had been a believable cousinly closeness was quietly discarded, only resurfacing when the writers needed a convenient family tableau. Adding to the mess, the show's genealogical gymnastics don't help. Michael and Lulu are not only cousins, but also in-laws, which is perfectly fine until the show insists on casting every cousin, half-sibling, and step-relative as a potential romantic partner. Port Charles has long outdone King's Landing when it comes to incest-adjacent storylines, yet viewers are expected to accept these characters bouncing between lovers and bloodlines without blinking. The selective memory extends to Lulu and Carly as well. Their relationship has whiplashed from intimate to estranged to suddenly saccharine. Carly once paid Brooke Lynn to seduce Dante in a scheme that directly targeted Lulu, but we are told to accept their closeness as though none of that happened. Apparently, in Port Charles, grudges vanish faster than plot continuity. Fans are simply instructed to believe that everyone must love Carly, whether it's Liz, Sam, Alexis, or Lulu, because the narrative demands it. The irony, of course, is that the show does remember just enough to tug at nostalgia. It reminds us that Lulu was in the room when Michael awoke from his coma. It drops in the detail that she is Jocelyn's godmother. It allows a flicker of cousinly affection when the writers decide family ties are useful. But then it promptly shoves that history back into the vault, as if it's a box of outdated wardrobe choices. The tragedy here isn't just the wasted history between Michael and Lulu, it's the way the show treats the Spencer family connections as optional decor. Michael is a Spencer by blood, but you wouldn't know it from how rarely it's acknowledged. Instead, the writers shuffle characters around funeral scenes, insert random attendees like Lucy based on threads thinner than a cobweb, and omit key relatives who would have had every reason to be present. Michael and Lulu were once a solid, believable pair of cousins whose connection mattered. That the show has forgotten, or rather chosen to ignore, that closeness says less about the characters and more about the laziness of its storytelling. Here's the recast decision General Hospital never told you about, because apparently we weren't supposed to notice. Soap operas thrive on recasts. Sometimes the shift is seamless, other times it's a whiplash-inducing reminder that producers assume the audience will simply squint and accept the substitution. The transition of Ned Ashton in General Hospital in '91 falls squarely in the middle, intriguing, questionable, and oddly unannounced. The original actor, Kurt Robin McKinney, had been playing Ned for 3 years, bringing a youthful, Rob Lowe-esque energy that suited the boyish air version of the character. He was charming, but perhaps not commanding enough for what the show needed next. Enter Wally Kurth, fresh from Days of Our Lives, whose mature presence gave Ned the weight to spar convincingly with towering Paul Satterfield over Jenny Eckert. In Soap Logic, the producers clearly couldn't resist importing Kurth for the role, even if it meant unceremoniously pushing McKinney aside. What makes the whole affair memorable is that no announcement was made to the audience. One week, Ned was one man. The next week, without explanation, Wally Kurth simply walked on set as though nothing had changed. For a character of Ned's prominence, the silence was strange, even by daytime television standards. Of course, hindsight has softened the transition. Wally Kurth didn't just step into the role, he defined it. 35 years later, he is so entrenched in Ned's DNA that it's almost impossible to imagine anyone else. McKinney may remain the sentimental, original Ned for some, but Kurth is the version who made the character iconic. That said, the casting choice does come with a bit of soap opera irony. Kurth and Jane Elliott, who plays Ned's mother Tracy, had previously played lovers on Days of Our Lives. For viewers in the know, their GH reunion had an extra layer of unintentional awkwardness. It was, as some might put it, icky, and not the kind of scandal soaps usually aim for. Still, soap operas thrive on reinvention, and in this case, the gamble paid off. McKinney may have been the prototype, but Wally Kurth became the blueprint. In the end, the lack of fanfare surrounding his debut only underscores the obvious. Sometimes the right actor doesn't just take over a role, they become it.